When we put together our walk around video of the new Parker Sorrento at the Düsseldorf Boat Show in January, the feedback was almost universally positive. But there was one guy suggesting that actually it's just an oversized version of the Flipper 900 ST, and another suggesting that there's no way we'd be able to achieve 46 knots with twin 300s on the transom. So we've come down to boats.co.uk in Essex to take this out on the water and see how she actually performs. Now, I said it in Düsseldorf and I'll say it again, this is a very pretty boat. As you walk along the side here, you see the little dips in the window line. It's a nice big one-piece window there, and these faceted angles factored into the mouldings. We've also got a very dynamic hull window there with little crimson accents that really bring the thing to life. We tried very hard with it, and in spite of the fact that it carries with it a decent bit of windage, it looks pretty purposeful. As for the deck layout of this boat, well, that all starts with a very pleasing little feature at the back end. Now, a great many motorboat and yachting readers, particularly those with slightly smaller budgets and smaller boats, really enjoy the idea of an aft cabin. That's been kind of popularised by Axopar in many ways, but the aft cabin here is really quite a superb example of its type. We simply flip up the cushion on that sunbed, slide the door forward, and down we go into the space. Now, conventionally you would have your bed running transverse across the transom with a view out past those engines. What we have here is a fore and aft bed of a very good size on the port side that takes full advantage of the raised furniture on the port side there with the cockpit dinette, and that frees up the starboard side for this, a little changing space, a little bit of storage, both in drawers and in that little netting built into the bulkhead there, plus a window that looks out onto the cockpit floor just for a bit of extra light and a bit of extra ventilation. So it's a pretty good space. You know, most people look at an aft cabin and think, well, it's a decent spot to dump extra baggage or dump the kids back here. But in truth, if you're cruising with kids, then a lot of people will favour putting the kids in the forward cabin and sticking themselves back here aft, just for an extra sense of security. And the scale of this particular aft cabin certainly enables that to happen. Heading back outside, we'll pop aft before we head forward, because here we have quite a practical sort of arrangement. We've got a nice big platform that hinges up so you can trim your engines right out, but it's plenty large enough for you to make your way from side to side. You've got the shore power on the port side. That makes loads of sense because there's no access point to the cockpit over here. There's a decent wet locker down in here, and if I look over to the starboard side, well, here beneath this locker we have a pretty good quality of ladder there for getting yourself in and out. No dedicated grab rails to grab hold of to assist you getting out of the water, but you do have a big cleat back here on that aft moulding, so that could come in handy, I would think. Spinning around, we'll close this door back up now and hinge the cushion back over, because what we have here, as things stand, is quite a neat little lounge seat for facing aft. You could easily fit 3-4 people there. Great if your kids are into water sports, or if you're just sitting at anchor enjoying the view with a bit of lunch. But if you want to expand that, that's no problem. We could take the aft backrest for this dinette in the cockpit and shift that forward. There we are, there's the handle. In fact, that's a two-handed job, isn't it? A pair of these to retain it in position. They weren't actually there on the Düsseldorf model, but it's certainly a welcome addition to keep things nice and sturdy. If we just grab these two locking mechanisms simultaneously, it's a simple job to shift that forward, and once you've done so, that expands your space greatly on this sun pad. Well, I call it a sun pad because that's what it's become. It was a lounger, now it's a proper sun pad. You could easily lay yourself out there, 2 or 3 people. And while it does sacrifice the usability of that dinette to a significant degree, well, actually, if you do put that forward, you can put this one forward too. That's the co-pilot seat, big enough for 2, and that means you can have that aft sunbed while still retaining seating inside the cockpit under shelter for up to 4 or 5 people, I would say. With these 2 backrests folded out in its favour though, this dinette really is an impressive size for a boat of this scale. If we look down, you'll see here's the raised moulding. It's very significantly moulded. I'd say that's about 1 foot, 11, 12 inches. They've raised that from the deck there just to generate extra space down in that aft cabin. That's very effective indeed. There's the window that gets a bit of light and ventilation down there as well. And as you'll see, this is a telescopic table. So at the push of a button, which is handily located right next door, you can drop that into the space, use the infill and turn this into an additional double berth, which means that you have that aft cabin, you have a forward cabin, and you have a convertible double in the middle, which will enable you, at least in principle, to carry 6 people overnight, which is very impressive on a boat of this scale. And all the more impressive because we have canvases ready to go just in here that slide around these runners and zip in the middle, so you can shelter this entire section from the elements and turn this into a very feasible weekending cabin. It's not just the scale of this cockpit that is impressive. Actually, some of the finer details work pretty hard. If we just move to the back end, you'll see we've got a nice deep recess in the bulwark there to contain your fenders. Move further forward and you'll see the storage spaces work really hard too. Because we've got a forward cabin and an aft cabin, no mid cabin, it means that there's plenty of space under here. That's got the covers for the bow space, which actually I'll take out so we can cover that up now we're back in. But the scale of that is very good indeed. Very user friendly. There's useful storage spaces all over this boat. While we're up here, it's worth having a look at this. We've got a nice little space in there for your phone with a charging point, and that in itself is a very comfy rest for your arm, so you can operate those throttles with real delicacy, with real accuracy. We've also got this, a massive MFD here at the dash. You only need the one, of course, because of the scale of it, and all the switching is electronic as well, which really tidies things up. It's very pared back. Then we've got the sunroof, which is vast, of course, comes midway back into the dinette space. And as you can see, it's lined with a lovely suede Alcantara style fabric that makes it feel quite luxurious. No coldness or drips from that. I like the size of this screen rim too, because as I say, you can stand up at the helm and this is your view. Plenty of visibility there. And if we look over to the port side and fold down this step for the co-pilot seat, well, we've got a nice little hatch here too. That opens right up, and if we just delve down into here, well, what we have here is the back end of that optional fridge on the port side, but we also have access to your battery down there, to your inverter down there. We've got the power steering pump down there as well, and here we've got the air conditioning unit, plus of course just tucked under there the hot water tank as well, all within really easy reach for servicing. If we spin around to the starboard side, you'll see that we have a very decent wet bar as well. Now that's tapered at the aft edge, just as the dinette is tapered on its leading edge, just to preserve the companionway as it zigzags across to the port side for access through onto that bow space, which we'll look at in a minute. What I really like here though, aside from the variety of storage and the placement of a very generous size of sink, plus an additional optional sink should you require it, is the sophistication of the thought processes going into this lid. Now obviously you can lift it up and anchor it in position, there we are. And when you do so, you've got good access to your sink and to your stovetop. This incidentally is not electric or induction. This is a new Dynacook hob from Poland, and this is gas under glass, which means you get all the benefits of immediate heat when you want it, but without the hazards associated with a naked flame on a boat. So that's quite a neat feature in itself. But if we want to then develop this a little further, we can bring it back up, slide it to the side. I'll attempt this one-handed, and then once we've slid it all the way across, oh, there we are. It's a difficult thing one-handed, but just about manageable. Down it goes into the position, and there you have access to your hob, access to your sink, and a really good size of work surface. Again, very impressive on a boat of this scale. If you need access in and out of the cockpit, of course, you'll have to sort of scamper over that backrest, but it's not a problem. It's a welcome feature. What you probably heard though as I was putting it down is this edge of the lid just fouling, just grinding against the worktop. So there's a bit of work needed there just to refine that so it doesn't rub one against the other. But it's a very good system. Now if we're looking at this cockpit and we're thinking, well yeah, this is impressive, but how have they managed to factor all this space into a boat of this scale? Well, the answer is pretty simple. If I just clamber past that wet bar and onto the starboard side, I'll nip back onto the pontoon and take a look again at the side of the boat. You'll see there's absolutely no side decks, which means that even though this boat is only around about 34-35 feet, the entire beam of 10'4" can be used for the internal space, and it really does pay dividends. That would be a problem, of course, if there were no decent access to the bow, but of course there is, and we'll check that out now. We walk around and to the port side, and here it is, opened up already. We've got a little door with its retainer low down, just to prevent the wind blast when you want to close it up, and a swing up window here. And if I just turn the camera around and show you where my head is there, well, I'm a 6-footer, so I reckon that comes up to about 5'10". So it's a pretty generous aperture to get to that foredeck, up a couple of steps, up 3 steps in fact, just to generate a little bit of extra volume down below in the cabin. We'll have a look at that in a minute. A couple of deck drains here, just to stop the water flowing back down into the cockpit. And when you get in here, well, those mouldings come right up to the knee, so it feels pretty secure. We've also got little grab rails around the edge. And the asymmetrical port deck wraps around to the starboard side, gives you easy access to the step-through forepeak, to the anchor locker, and also gives you lovely access to this. And I like this very much in Dusseldorf, and I like it even more here actually, not least because we have this alternative colour of upholstery, kind of denim colour. It looks fantastic, and the quality is there again. This kind of diamond stitching, no, it's not real stitching, it looks very cool. Very hard-wearing fabrics. Easy access under there, I would think, to a hatch. Yeah, there we are, a circular hatch, which is a bit of a rarity these days, particularly on a modern-looking boat like this. And there's lots of space there. Good, sturdy, comfortable backrest for at least 3 people. Nice armrests, built-in cup holders. And also, I like this too, a little cubby hole for your phone with a charging point too. It's a really neatly arranged zone, and if you want to expand that zone, create a little more in the way of sunbathing space, where there are infills that take advantage of these 2 lips just here, built into the fiberglass, so you can fill this entire space and really make a meal of it. But of course, a bow space that works this hard always creates a compromise down below, so we'll pop immediately down and take a look at that. Because I've already said this is, at least in principle, a 6-berth boat, and the primary space amongst those 6 berths would be forward in the V of the bow. Now we step down into an atrium. We've got the electrics here on the port side, a little bit of netting storage again. These woods really work in the boat's favour, and when you're greeted with a couple of doors and a bulkhead, it can feel a bit like a coffin, but the brightness of this sort of pine light oak style wood really works well. Open that up and it secures itself in place with a magnet. I'll get rid of my camera bag so we can actually see what's going on in here. There we are. What we have is a raised bed that entirely fills that space. We've got storage on either side, good shelving, more of this lovely bright wood. The windows are relatively narrow, relatively shallow I should say, but they're certainly long and panoramic. So they do emit a decent amount of light, even without that hatch up above getting any chance to join the party, because of course it's covered with that cushion. I was quite confused by these. You'll see this a fair bit on this boat. No handles on the hatch here, so I was trying to get into it. All you apparently have to do is push the back edge and then it will hinge up. Again, this is probably not a one-handed job, but there we are, we're in. It's very simple, very effective. We have the same on the other side. It just makes this boat feel a little bit cleaner and more modern. It's very, very much fuss-free. Under the bed itself, we have storage, but what we don't have is a hinged mattress. So again, just like the aft cabin, we've got two parts to the mattress, the forward part and an aft part. If we move the aft part and lift this up, oh, there we are. It all comes up in one piece, and we have access to the bow thruster down in here and the batteries. And beyond that, a beautifully lined space, really good size that. If I pop my hand in for some sort of perspective on that, easily fit a suitcase in there, no trouble at all, or canvases or infills. Really generous. And that's a particularly useful feature because it means that you can save the dedicated storage spaces on either side for the things you need readily to hand. Now I filled that one with the infills for up top. But as you can see, this is hanging storage. We've also got a little remote for climate control, plus another remote for your Fusion stereo. And at the access point to this cabin, at least, headroom is really very generous. I reckon that must be 6'5", perhaps. Very good indeed. Let's spin ourselves around again. Move my bag out of the way, it seems to be following us around. And check out the starboard heads compartment, because I think this is particularly impressive. There we are. What we get is an angled toilet, make best use of space on that leading bulkhead, with the sink and the storage, some more high-level storage up there, plus a decent window. Not very long, but certainly very deep. Gives you lots of light. And we also get, this you don't necessarily expect, a proper dedicated shower compartment aft. With its own little built-in seats, you can take it easy, relax in the morning. Although in fairness, you only have a 100-litre water tank, so you can't relax too much. Maybe turn the shower off between lathering. In terms of the compromises down here, well, there really are very few. I'd say the only actual pinch points involve when you're trying to get through these doors. The door frames are a little low, so you have to stoop a touch as a six-footer. But really, given the scale of the boat and what else it achieves elsewhere, you'd have to say that both the scale and the arrangement of the lower deck has plenty of merit. Now, while we're talking about the spatial arrangements, let's pop back up top. Because even though I've talked about how this cockpit uses the full beam and how the backrests moving fore and aft help eke every bit of merit out of the available space, well, on the starboard side, you do have to work with the Parker designers to manage that space a touch. Now, as I say, the wet bar, there's good things happening over there, but often when a wet bar butts up against a helm seat, well, there's not sufficient travel to adjust that helm seat. Not so here. You can adjust the helm seat. Let me do that right now. Shift it back, create a bit of extra space at the helm for a larger skipper. But of course, when you do so, the lid for the wet bar won't open past the back end of that. And on the other side of the coin, if you're a smaller skipper and you move the helm seat forward just to make things a bit more intimate and comfortable, well, you probably want to drop this as well. That's the platform comes down onto this ledge here, just to raise your level so you can stand up and look over the screen rim there. Well, that won't come past the leading edge of that helm seat. So as I say, you do have to juggle things around a bit, but given how much this cockpit offers, I'd say that's a very worthwhile compromise indeed. Well, we're at the helm now, as promised. It's a pretty breezy day today. It's running around about 20 knot easterlies, gusting to 27. So we found some relatively sheltered water, but we're still getting a fair bit of it. So it'll be an interesting test of this boat's windage. Now, spin around into the wind a little bit. We go on single lever, and as I say, we've got twin 300s on this boat, exactly the rig that the feedback from our online video suggested was not likely to achieve 46 knots, but actually we've just been having a play and achieved 47 knots with exactly this rig with 3 men on board. So it is precisely as the manufacturers suggest. Let's get her up and onto the plane. A little bit of bow lift there, but the acceleration is rapid. easily passing 25, 30 knots. As I say, 47 knots is not a problem at all. What's particularly interesting though is the fact that if I settle down here around about 38 knots, well, in terms of running efficiency, it's pretty much the same as we're seeing at 22 knots. So we're looking at about 2.9, just under 2.9 litres per nautical mile. And that's quite a good rate of return. It needs to be, because the size of the fuel tank on this is 465 litres. You know, the designers are trying to do so much in terms of the internal arrangements on here that there's not a great deal of space for a big, beefy fuel tank. So you've got about 370 litres to play with. And at 2.9 litres per nautical mile, that gives us a range of around about 130 nautical miles, which for most family applications is plenty. Something else that makes itself very clear here is the fact that this is a boat that likes to heel and to handle a little bit. You can have a lot of fun with it. As you can see, as I throw the wheel round, loads of lovely heel. A little bit obscured in terms of your visibility to port when you're turning that way, but of course you've got this massive overhead sunroof, so you can sort that out, no problem at all. Visibility is good too, and it gets all the better when you fold down this platform and pop your head up above the level of the screen rim there. And it's quite a narrow screen rim, so it doesn't get in the way. Now I'm told that in the future there'll be the option of sliding windows, one on either side. So that will be a bonus as far as seamanship duties go, because of course there are no side decks on this boat, so single-handed helming is potentially a little bit problematic. But given the amount that this boat is able to do, because it uses so much of that beam on the inside, that's a pretty worthwhile compromise. As I say though, there are engine options. Now we got loads of poke here with these twin 300s, loads and loads of pickup, and that top end of 47 knots, so that's plenty. But you can spec this with 350s for the promise of around about 52 knots. You can also spec it with a pair of 250s or even 200s. Now I think 250s should be good for around about 42 knots, and the 200s 38, 39 knots. In all honesty, for a lot of family users, the kind of people who are going to be buying this boat, that's going to be plenty. But if you're kind of in between the speed freak and the family boater, if you enjoy a bit of a drive, then I'd suggest that these 300 horsepower V8s is exactly the kind of package you need. So there we are. We've had a look at this boat on the show stand in Dusseldorf, where I have to say we were really impressed with the ingenuity of the design and the thoughtfulness of the deck layout, both up top and down below. And we've had a look at this boat here in Essex out on the water, albeit not at sea because conditions won't allow that today. So we can't yet vouch for its seakeeping. But what we can do on the basis of what we've seen is say that this is not just a good looking boat and a very well arranged family cruiser. This is also a bit of a driver's boat too.